Welcome back. Here with us on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Joining us on the broadcast right now is Jayant Sinha, Member of Parliament and Chairperson for Standing Committee on Finance. Mr. Sinha, thank you very much for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. Ukraine crisis has started impacting us, our economy as well. Fuel price hike is what we are seeing since last 2 days. What is your assessment? Where is it headed?
India is very well positioned in a very turbulent global economy. As you know, domestically, every one of our economic parameters is doing extremely well. Growth is picking up very strongly. Our exports are at record highs. Inflation is still quite well contained. Our current account deficit, our foreign exchange reserves, all of these numbers are very, very positive for us right now. Unfortunately, as you correctly pointed out, the Ukrainian crisis and of course the after effects of this terrible COVID pandemic are starting to create a lot of challenges as far as the global economy is concerned. Of course, we should talk about oil prices, but before I do that, let me emphasize that the Fed has moved to the tightening cycle, and that they have already raised their rates and they will continue to raise their rates 6 times this year. So the Fed tightening cycle also has a lot of impact on the global economy. But now let me come to the question specifically of oil prices. Of course, oil prices, were quite benign for several years. Hovering around $50, $60, $70 a barrel, and now they're in the $100 to $120 per barrel. So this is something that is certainly going to impact us. However, because we've built up a large number of diversified sources, including, of course, Russia, that is willing to provide us crude at a discount. And at the same time, we are undertaking a very massive transition to green energy. I think the impact of imported fossil fuels, that is oil prices on the Indian economy, will be something that we will be able to manage.
But Mr. Sinha, when the election season was on at that time, there was a freeze on fuel prices for about 138 days. We did not see any change in fuel prices. And now oil marketing companies have started increasing the prices. People are getting impacted. Don't you think the government should do something?
A lot is being done. Obviously, the government has been providing a variety of subsidies for important essential commodities like food grains, like fertilizers, and also in some ways for petrol and diesel as well. By removing the excise taxes that we had earlier, we have provided a little bit of a cushion for people. And those are some of the tools that we will use by looking at what we can do as far as food prices are concerned, by increasing and enhancing subsidies, by looking at fossil fuel prices at the petrol station. These are all tools that can be used to be able to manage inflation and to keep Mehngai under control. So the government is doing all that it can. There is very significant fiscal support that's going into the economy right now. And of course, as you know, the best solution to all of this is job growth, which through this budget where we really emphasize capital expenditure, we really think that that's going to have a high multiplier effect and lead to good, strong job growth. And the EPFO numbers are starting to show that right now. So as long as we have good job growth and wage growth, we should be able to get through this phase as well.
One more question on the issue of fuel price pain for the middle class. Almost 50% of what we are paying for 1 liter of petrol and diesel is the tax component right now. Do you think the government has fiscal space to reduce the excise duty to give some relief to the people in this country? Because already inflation is a big problem.
No, that's a great question. And of course, fiscal space is limited because we have just gone through a very substantial deficit spending period through the COVID pandemic when it was very important to support the economy. And we did all the right things. We supported the economy, which is why growth is so strong and all our economic parameters are so positive right now. So we've done all the nice things. But because we've done that, going forward, our fiscal space is in fact limited. That being said, as I also have emphasized earlier, we still have very large subsidy programs underway right now in food grains, in fertilizers, in support that we are providing, the Kisan Samman Nidhi. So we have a number of very large support programs underway right now to cushion prices, to cushion people's welfare. And of course, as I said, the economic policies that we are pursuing of job growth, of wage growth, they are the best solutions for increasing prices or inflation of any kind.
The question is the optimism that you spoke about as far as the state of the economy is concerned. Will this crisis stay? Will this optimism really stay given the current circumstances that we are in, the geopolitical crisis that we have, the spike in COVID cases in some parts of the world?
Budget estimates are very much, stable, and I don't think that they are going to have to be adjusted in any substantial way. I think those contingencies were well reflected in the budget. So I think in that sense, we've got a very steady hand on the ship, and the budget and the government's policies will continue. That being said, of course, we are dealing with very turbulent global factors that are at work. As far as the global situation is concerned, what we're trying to do in terms of our foreign policy and what everyone is trying to do globally is to bring the Ukrainian crisis to a close as peacefully and as quickly as possible. And that is one of the most important ways we can stabilize the global economy. All that being said, India's growth, I think, is going to continue to be quite strong going forward. Yes, there is some impact because of commodity inflation. For sure, there's some impact. But look at the drivers for the Indian economy right now. They're very, very strong, very robust. Number one, obviously, the government's capital expenditure, which is continuing through this budget at a very substantial level. And in that, the kind of money that we are spending on national highways, as Honorable Transport Minister Shri Nitin Gadkari ji explained in Parliament yesterday, is extraordinary what is going on as far as road transport is concerned. Obviously, we are spending very substantially on airports and aviation, which again, the Honorable Civil Aviation Minister was explaining today. There's in the next 3 years, we have 1 lakh crores going into airports and aviation system. That's a tremendous amount of capital expenditure. So government capital expenditure continues to be very strong. Number two, we have 100 unicorns. They are growing and scaling rapidly. They're attracting a lot of investment, and that's long-term sticky investment. It's not hot money of any kind. I think that will be a second very important growth driver. And third, India's export engine is humming. Our exports are growing very, very quickly because we built up India's competitiveness. We built up the competitiveness of our companies. And I think that will continue to drive growth. When you talk to the IT services companies, for example, speaking about exports, they'll tell you that they are massively adding people. I just spoke to a company yesterday, which is one of the world's leading fintech companies. And they told me that in the last 3 years, they've increased their headcount in India from 4,000 people to 10,000 people. And they said, we want to keep on increasing it because Indian talent is so good and so productive. So I think exports, capital expenditure, our startup system, all of these are going to continue to drive very robust growth for India going forward. And that is, I think, to some extent, well insulated from the turbulence and the problems that we're seeing globally.
But given the current geopolitical situation, given the way there is COVID spike in some countries around the world, can we really rely on export-led growth?
In fact, both the trends that you mentioned are positive for India, not negative for India. And as far as reform is concerned, we've announced a whole slew of reforms, and they are moving forward very quickly. But let me tell you why both those trends, which is the geopolitical situation as well as COVID, are so positive for India. Number one, the geopolitical situation actually favors India, an open democratic country. People are thinking very carefully about where the supply chains are. They don't want the supply chain in autocratic countries. They want the supply chains in open democratic countries like India. And so we are benefiting a great deal from investments in India, supply chains being situated in India. I told you about the IT services company, the fintech company that's growing so quickly. We'll see more of that because people want to be able to invest and grow their businesses in stable countries like India. So that's one reason why that's so positive for us. Second, when we look at COVID is now in a situation where we have remedies, and these are both vaccines as well as pharmaceutical remedies. India is a very large producer of both vaccines and these pharmaceutical remedies. And so as people start to deal with COVID in its endemic shape, they will look to India as being a hub of pharmaceutical manufacturing, as being a hub of medical supplies, as being a hub of vaccine manufacturing. And that's going to enable those industries to grow rapidly as well. So I think, both of these two trends are going to be actually positive for India, because we built the competitiveness, we built the manufacturing capability, we built the entrepreneurial capacity to serve the world in a unique and differentiated way, particularly as the world moves away from autocratic countries and towards democratic countries like India.
Mr. Sinha, as the chairperson for Standing Committee on Finance, what is your view on cryptos in India? Should cryptos be legalized? Because RBI has been opposing, cryptos for a very, very long time.
Crypto is legal in India. I just explained how it's legal. RBI has taken a very clear position where they've said that they will put in place a sovereign digital currency, and that's exactly what they're working on right now. And with respect to how the different use cases should be regulated, we as the Standing Committee on Finance are waiting for the crypto bill from the government to come to us. It's government's job to put and frame this particular bill, to go through the use cases, work with global regulators, and establish a legal framework for crypto. Once that legal framework is established through a draft bill that comes to Parliament, then of course, hopefully we as the Standing Committee will get a chance to look at it and further strengthen it and improve it. That is the legislative process. And so that is the process that is going through right now. And that is what we are keenly all watching.
So you don't really agree with views of RBI on crypto?
RBI has made its positions very clear, which is that they are the custodian of the sovereign digital currency, and that is an appropriate position to take views in a virtual world or in a metaverse. These are all different use cases that need to be thought through. They need to be regulated. And then we have to make sure that whatever technology we use is going to be appropriate for the Indian context. I'll give you one simple example so you know that there are some really tricky technical issues that we have to navigate through. And this is the question of the private key. If I, as the owner of a crypto asset, have the private key, I can exchange the private key with whomever I want anywhere in the world. And this will enable me to evade the capital controls and the kinds of regulations we have in place in India right now, which is very dangerous from a money laundering or from a terrorism financing point of view. So because of those reasons, because private keys can be moved around so easily and enable people to move these assets around, it's very important in India to figure out whether we should have a key intermediary where everybody's private keys are stored in a very secure way. Now, those innovations are necessary from the industry so that we can then regulate this whole set of technologies much, much better. And so I'll say on your channel what I have said many times to industry stakeholders, which is please prepare a roadmap for the different use cases. Look at what global practice is in terms of how regulation is evolving, and taking into account India's unique circumstances associated with capital controls and so on, propose what you think is the right way to regulate this. So we are looking for that kind of leadership, that kind of thinking from the industry as well. And that is in fact part of the consultation process that the Ministry of Finance is undertaking with the industry.
All right, Mr. Sinha, thank you very much for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening.